Morning, everybody. Morning. This is the Kansas State Transportation Council quarterly meeting for June 8th. And welcome, everybody. Let everybody know Chairman Lefebvre had his operation yesterday, went well. He texted me this morning saying he even sign on for the meeting.
Oh, that's great.
At this time, Jim, you have some housekeeping slides, some information.
Yeah, so just to remind folks that in accordance with New York State meeting law, we're able to have this meeting in a hybrid format. Some of our members are viewing on Zoom, and for some reason the screen just cleared out.
It's working for them.
Tom Pollock, I can see you. Are you able to see our presentation still?
What was that? I can hear you.
Are you able to see our presentation still?
Yes. Yep, I can see it.
Okay, so you can see it online, but not in the room. So if you can see, for those that were in the room, if you can see the slide, basically saying that we are offering this up in hybrid format, so folks can be in the room or viewing over Zoom. Those would be meeting participants. The general public and other meeting observers are able to use through the publicinput.com portal that GTC has. Members of the public will be able to provide or post comments or ask questions via text, Zoom, email, recorded voice message, or during the public forum, we're able to open up a bridge to allow folks on the phone to talk directly. The video conference is being recorded and will be archived on the GTC website along with the minutes. Alex, you turn the next slide, please. Oh, yeah, you have it. Those that are joining us on the publicinput.com portal are able to call in toll free if they don't have devices. Go 855-925-2801 and enter code 8998. This toll-free number will allow people to participate. And then if they want to leave a voice message, they can press *2. If they want to speak to the committee in real time, they can hit *3 and be entered into the queue. Email messages should be sent to gtcboard@publicinput.com. You can text J18625 to that same phone number, 855-925-2801, and that'll launch a question in text that allows you to submit any comments.
Excuse me, Jim, at this point, can we just take one moment and rejoin the meeting so we can have it display up here?
Okay.
It'll be fine for everybody watching, so if you just hang with us for a moment. For those of you that have devices, that works too, but.
So the next slide just highlights the agenda, which was in the meeting package. If we can move into
Ontario County, Mr. Campbell. Orleans County, Ms. Johnson.
John Peppinetti sitting in for Johnson.
Thank you. Seneca County, Mr. Enslow.
Mitch Rowe representing.
Wayne County, Mr. Ignor. Wyoming County, Ms. Ryan. Yates County, Ms. Church. For the Monroe County Executive, Mr. Bella.
Tom Pollock representing.
Monroe County Planning Board, Mr. Santos.
Rochelle Bell representing.
Monroe County Supervisors Association, Mr. Schultz. Monroe County at large, Mr. Hogan.
Here.
Monroe County at large, Mr. McCann.
Scott Levisich representing.
City of Rochester Mayor Evans.
Rich Karen representing.
Rochester City Council President Melendez. City of Rochester Planning Commission, Mr. Watson. City of Rochester at large, Mr. Frisch.
Here.
Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah.
Rochester Genesee Regional Transportation Authority, Mr. Jeffries. Empire State Development Corporation, Ms. Knight.
Steve Goldie representing.
New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Mr. Sagos.
Timothy Walsh representing.
New York State Department of Transportation, Ms. Dominguez.
Chris Reed representing.
New York State Thruway Authority, Mr. Ware.
Sean Carrington representing.
Federal Aviation Administration, Ms. Martinez. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Marquis. At TA, Mr. Goodman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Alex. At this time, public forum, is there any members of the public that would like to address this board?
No, we did not receive anything, but we do have about 7 people observing the meeting.
Very good, 7 people online. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the February 23rd quarterly meeting. Motion in a second.
So moved.
Second time.
Okay, we have a motion in a second. Any corrections? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. The minutes are obviously informational for purposes of the April 13th Planning Committee meeting, and the draft minutes from the May 18th Planning Committee are also provided in your informational packets. Item 4, communications and announcements. Jim?
Yes, we have a couple board changes. David Riley, City of Rochester at large, has been designated an alternate, and also Ben Fisher from the Federal Highway Administration New York Division has been named as an alternate. NISDOT, Chris Reed, congratulations. He's now the permanent regional director. And we also had staff changes on May 25th was Bob Williams' last day. He was integral to our active transportation planning. He missed, but he had an opportunity in Canada that he's long desired. So at least we're not losing to somebody local. But his vacancy was posted 2 days ago. Fill that vacancy before too long and keep momentum going. Try to get back to helping out lines with our technical assistance.
Anything else, Jim?
That's it on the communications and announcements.
Great, thank you. Our reports and actions, old business planning committee. Scott?
Thank you. Morning, everyone. The planning committee met on April 13th and May 8th and recommends the GTC board accept 3 reports as evidence of completion of Unified Planning Work Program tasks. Those projects were the en route charging feasibility study, regional traffic operations center strategic plan, and the regional village local service study. Amend the fiscal year 2023-2024 Unified Planning Work Program to reflect the contribution of actual fiscal year 2022-2023 rollover amounts. Amend the federal fiscal years 2023 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program as requested by New York State Department of Transportation, and amend the National Performance Measures Report and the federal fiscal years 2023-2027 TIP by revising the pavement and bridge condition, system performance, freight performance, and transit asset management performance targets. Additionally, the planning committee took the following actions. We approved the scopes for work for 8 UPWP tasks. They were the City of Rochester 88 Transition Plan, Monroe County Traffic Signal Preemption Study, Village of Fairport Zoning Code Update, the RGRTA Origin and Destination Study, Regional Alternative Fuel Vehicle Infrastructure Tools, TIP Best Practices Study, Joseph Avenue Art Walk Master Plan, Genesee River Trail Completion Study, Town of Rush Comprehensive Active Transportation Plan. Lastly, we approved 4 administrative modifications to the federal fiscal year 2023-2027 transportation improvement program as requested by Wyoming County, Monroe County, RGRTA, and the New York State Department of Transportation. Those projects were increasing the total cost of County Route 30 rehabilitation project, reinstating highway preventive maintenance number 9 project, increasing the total cost of replacement of paratransit buses project fiscal year 2023, and increasing the total cost of Route 104 from Route 940M, which is like Adam, to Culver Road preventive maintenance project. Sorry.
Thank you. Got all that in one sheet of paper?
Once you- Thanks to the staff.
And it's not even 8:45.
GT staff report, Jim?
Yeah, really the biggest thing of note is we've been, staff has been pretty active with the planning for next year's eclipse. Since the last board meeting, we've had several presentations, both in person and online. We were asked to present to the Capital District Health Emergency Preparedness Coalition after they heard us talking, or heard Rochester talking to Western New York. And that's going to be of particular importance to them in the Adirondacks area. So we're happy to extend that courtesy. Met out at SUNY Brockport with their Eclipse Task Force. The center line of the Eclipse is going right over the Brockport campus, so they're planning special events. Our statewide association of MPOs has community engagement folks like Lori, so Lori was able to share with them. We've done with parent and ambulance directly, and then other traffic and public safety meetings as well. Monroe County Legislator Jackie Smith was particularly concerned about the Sweden Parks and Rockport area, with some of the narrow roads and the Main Street Bridge over Erie Canal being out of service for construction unavoidably. So we had a meeting that she convened with local officials, school district, county sheriff, county emergency management. So it was a good meeting. We were asked to join a presentation talking to some current retired public safety officials to help spread the word. So we were happy to do that. And then a couple weeks ago, the GFL RPC, the Regional Planning Council, has a local government workshop twice a year. And we went out to Batavia and spoke to local government officials about what to expect, what to plan for, and that's continuing to prompt more opportunities to talk to people when they're ready. Already scheduled before the next meeting, the Health Emergency Preparedness Coalition more locally, and Monroe County Council of Governments in a couple of weeks we've been asked to talk to them. We have some meetings already scheduled beyond the next meeting, but I just want to offer up that if your councils, your boards, existing meeting structures, staff want an update, we're happy to present to others as well. Next slide, Patel.
Jim, my 2 kids are involved in schools, and I think the schools have already put that in the calendar as a day off for next year.
Yeah, my understanding is Brighton is still on the calendar for a half day, but all the other school districts in Western New York have done the whole day.
Right.
So, you know, and that was a big push, particularly from the Rochester Museum and Science Center. We don't want any kids on a school bus missing the eclipse, number one. But then school buses stuck in the traffic. Right. But then that had to be balanced with, okay, another day of childcare, because it's the week following the traditional week off. In some places, that's the primary source of nutrition for some of the kids. So working with, I think there's an effort to continue to create programming at school, particularly where there's neighborhood schools, and use that as the location for events. The Museum and Science Center got a grant to establish an ambassador program where they're going out and they have about, I think it's 52 community organizations that are they're being trained and equipped to host events in their neighborhood. Among those is the Monroe County Library System and the OWL Library System, and I don't remember what OWL stands for, but it's basically the counties outside of, yeah, but I think there's two OWL. Maybe there's two W's. Yeah, maybe it's Orleans, Wyoming, I don't know. There's another library system. Organizations like the YMCA, YWCA that have multiple locations. The city of Rochester, there are centers that are, as I understand it, it's a combination of the recreation department and the city school district, so that there's facilities in the schools. But again, trying to create opportunities in the neighborhood for children and their families to view the eclipse safely and in an educated way.
So, question, is there any talk about restricting construction activity at all during that time?
I know new contracts kicking off are being planned, not to start April 1, to start afterward, but Chris may be in a better position.
Yeah, we're putting notes in our plans for projects that they can have any short-term lane closures. If there's a long-term lane closure, we're not going to make them change that. But our projects include a note that they can't have lane closures on that Monday.
That's the only thing right now.
Yeah, the statewide has not taken a position on any kind of global, we call it an embargo. You know, we usually have it around holidays where we don't have lane closures. We'll likely do something similar.
How about the city? Is there anything going on with that? That's right.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one that we'll look at is where we stand with the Pontoon Bridge. That'll be the big one, because I believe we're going to have cameras and some other things there, with the high falls in the background. So we're working depending on where we are in the job. Right now, we're planning on having them haul to work for that, but that's more of an aesthetic thing. I think in terms of our construction program, I mean, we'll look at it, but again, we're not providing ingress and egress from other regions. I mean, once you're in the city, you're moving around. And we have a pretty dense street network, so you can move. I mean, we see that with like State Street. People complain about it, but it's a quarter-mile stretch, and you can go to St. Paul or Clemens. So if you're sitting on State Street in construction right now, not accessing a business that's in the zone, that's your fault. So we'll move a few of our other things around. But yeah, I don't know. We haven't looked at, say, an embargo completely, but we will look at probably any work that's done on our materials, and then look to move those around.
So I should stop calling when I'm sitting in traffic then.
Once you got business there. No, you can call me and I'll show you those detour routes. I'll come walk you around. It's only a quarter mile.
I think one example of a project that took into consideration the I-490 road here in town, I think it's written into the contract that it'll be after April 8th getting in. You might typically start when the weather cooperates, but in this case, because there's going to be a crossover and shifts, some of the work can be done outside the main line, but the lane closures won't happen before it close.
Have to get the light plants up.
I'm sorry?
Light plants, we have to put the light plants up.
Yeah.
I don't know, did Rochelle want to say something?
No.
Okay.
So, I mean, as I mentioned before, Visit Rochester, the Visitor Bureau for the region is estimating 350 to 500,000 visitors, and the State Office of Emergency Management folks are anticipating between Finger Lakes region and Western New York 1 million visitors. And when you consider that Buffalo and Cleveland and folks to the west are in that path, we're the easternmost city in the path. So our draw would be the eastern seaboard. If you think the Boston to DC corridor, all within 400 miles of Rochester, and no, they're not under the path of totality. So that means the throughway, Route 15, 390, 86, 80, we expect vehicles coming up from the east or from the southern tier, and then everybody wanting to leave at the same time. So that's going to be part of the challenge. The biggest challenge is immediately after, when so many folks that maybe they need to get home and they got kids in school and they pulled up for one day, they need to be back for the next day, or they just say, okay, I'm done. But there's concerted efforts locally to among the hospitality to try to keep people around, and we have for social media hashtag Take Tuesday 2. The NCAA men's basketball championship games that night. So we're trying to put packages together with hotels and restaurants, bars, sports bars, try to anything we can to keep folks around. And that's where encouraging any of the communities that are doing events, try to think of hosted events, food trucks, live music, whatever we can do to try to help keep people around for just to disperse that initial flush of traffic. Next slide, still talking a little bit more about Eclipse. So on April 6th, we had a 1 year out event, a media event with Congressman Borelli, State Senator Jerry Cooney, Monroe County Executive Adam Bello, and Rochester Mayor Lee Evans were in attendance. Some other folks from Zoom Rockport, Visit Rochester, from the Museum and Science Center. So it was a good event to try to drum up some awareness. The local task force that cross-sector, it's science, educators, it's hospitality, it's public sector. There's over 650 active participants in that now. We had last week another meeting at the Museum and Science Center, and folks were able to join online. And because really Rochester is seen as a leader, we had people from other areas on Zoom. I've ever seen Oswego, Watertown. So people, we're sharing information even if you're not in Rochester, because it's easy to get on a Zoom call. And also a recognition of what we're doing here in the Rochester region. Lori and myself have been invited to present at the American Astronautical Society Eclipse Workshop in Albuquerque. We're actually flying out this afternoon.
They picked up the tab for the.
Yeah, that's right. They got a grant from NASA, so they are paying for our airfare and hotel, which helps.
Hey, Jim, any other staff comments?
That's it on staff.
All right, old business. Jim discussed the federal legislative and funding.
Yeah, so just trying to keep a running list of the discretionary grant opportunities. I had previously mentioned that, or at the previous meeting mentioned that there was the bus and bus facilities and low and no emission vehicle FTA grants. RGRK did apply for those, waiting to hear back. Hopefully they're successful. Those applications were due April 13th. There's a charging and fueling infrastructure. NOFO's notice of funding opportunity that was released March 14th. The original due date was May 30th, but it was extended to June 13th next week. One of the challenges for the community charging aspect of this was the minimum project size. I believe it was 500,000 federal, so that's 625,000. And even the city of Rochester had expressed concern about being able to put a project of that scale. To their credit, NYSERDA stepped up and said they were willing to take on a statewide application for any communities that wanted to piggyback with them. I'm aware that City of Rochester and Livingston County indicated that they will be participating. I don't know if any of our other communities are. I know I had conversations a while back with Genesee County, with the county planner Felipe Otamari, and email exchanges with county manager Landers. I don't know if ultimately they're piggybacking on the NYSERDA, but we saw that as an opportunity and made sure to communicate that out. The Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, that notice of funding opportunity was released on March 31st with applications due July 10th. There's actually on the agenda for discussion later. Wildlife Crossing pilot program is a little interesting. I don't know that we'll have any projects, but we shared it, with applications due August 1st. And the resiliency program, Protect, that NOFO was released on April 21st with applications due August 18th. We previously conducted critical transportation infrastructure vulnerability assessment. So I've encouraged folks that are considering a project to reach out to Joe Bavenzi, who might have some stuff to support applications. I've heard from Laura Leone at NISTOC Region 4 that they're looking at potential projects. I haven't heard of anybody else looking at potential projects, but it's an opportunity to get some resiliency type projects in the mix. And then looking ahead a little bit, new programs that were on there and the dates have adjusted, gotten a little more refined. The multimodal project grants, this is large, very large projects they have under, they call mega, infra, and rural. There are different categories of projects under this umbrella. And as we get some information details, we will share that. That originally had been up as spring, now they're saying June. So we'll see that should be coming out any day now. Thriving Communities is another program, planning effort summer. Reconnecting Communities, this was things like the Nobu project. They are now went from late spring to summer, so we're waiting to hear that. There's some implementation funds, there's some planning funds. Another big one is the Bridge Investment Program. And I've had some initial conversations with Joel Kleinberg about potential projects for there. And then the Strengthen Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation grants, the SMART grant, Monroe County and the City of Rochester Fire Department, the Public Safety, RGRTA, are looking with the Unified Planning Work Program. We funded a study to look at the signal system currently has emergency vehicle preemption. That technology that's there is getting dated. So looking at upgrading to new technologies, but then the potential that those new technologies could also support transit signal priorities. So if the bus is running behind and hold the green light a little more, could help the bus route performance. So that study is being done. We're hoping that there's enough work done in the study that by the time the applications are due for SMART, we can submit an informed application even if the study's not complete, and then hopefully get some implementation funds in a relatively short amount of time. That's a lot going on there. One of the things that we've tried to do in-house, so back in the fall, I had met with Peter as the vice chairperson, David Lefebvre as the chairperson, Bill Carpenter, who was the CEO of GRK at the time, our host agency. So one of the things they had asked me about was, what can we do to try to take advantage of these discretionary opportunities? And we've built, we've assembled a tool in-house and we're working to populate data. Basically, instead of relying on an opportunity comes up like, oh wait, what projects do we have? And trying to remember who to email. We're trying to compile project information and we can identify the eligible fund sources so that when that fund source goes live with a funding opportunity, we can click on that. We have a list of projects we've already identified that are eligible for that so that we can reach out to the project sponsors. And initially we're populating that with our planning studies, but we're hoping to be able to get engaged with different communities and what projects do you have that we don't even know about that could potentially be funded. So we're trying to build that capacity to be an additional resource to our communities. That's it on the funding update.
Great, thanks, Jim. Just a reminder to tip staff modifications, the reports are in your package. Is there any questions this time that staff might be able to answer? If not, I'm going to item 6, action items. If there is no objections for 6A, 1, 2, and 3, the UPWP project closeouts could be considered under a single action. And a motion, second to consider on the side, motion on the second. Thank you. All right, so 6A, number 1, route charging feasibility study. Number 2, regional traffic operations centers, regional plan, which Jim had mentioned. All right, and no, Joe had.
I'll take the lead on them, and if there's technical questions, Joe is here to back me up. So the en route charging feasibility study was conducted by RGRTA, and the purpose was to study the feasibility of en route charging electric buses in the fixed route system. New York State established a policy that the largest transportation providers, public transportation providers in the state, transition to zero emissions fleet by 2035. And this project was intended to help the RTS staff understand if en route charging was a viable option. They know that if they were to do their whole fleet, they could not charge them here every night. But are there other places in the community along the route that can get to boost charge throughout the day? And this would be part of a larger strategy to transition to a zero emission fleet. The process included creating an initial inventory of potential locations, developing criteria to analyze those locations, evaluating the feasibility of en route charging at each of those locations. Is there sufficient room? Buses go through there. Is there capacity within the electrical grid to support it? Things like that. And then just verifying that those locations can serve the need under various operating conditions. Go to the next slide. Out of the 14 initial routes that were analyzed, 6 locations were identified as being feasible. They're listed on the slide. But there are still limitations to the electric buses. There are still routes that are pretty long that make the range a challenge. RTS has experienced that in the wintertime. They draw more battery for heating than they do for propulsion. And I think it's similar in the summertime when the air conditioning need is strong. So one of the things that RGRT is doing there, have ordered hydrogen fuel buses that would try to, they'll evaluate those against the electric buses and see is hydrogen a more suitable system here in Rochester. So, and because of the demonstration grants they got, they're actually having 2 different hydrogen platforms, 2 different approaches that they'll have be able to compare head to head. And I think that's RGRT will be the only system in the country that has the 2 competing systems to be able to, or 2 competing technologies. So others will probably come and check out what you guys have found out. So it'll be a nice test bed, and it's partnering with Plug Power, who is building a green hydrogen facility in Judson County to generate hydrogen, and Plug Power is already a New York State company, so creating more jobs in New York. The next study is the Regional Traffic Operations Center Strategic Plan. And this project was led by NISDOT. The purpose was to develop a strategic plan for the Regional Traffic Operations Center to guide the activities over the next 10 years. The Regional Traffic Operations Center is getting close to 25 years. So the facility itself needs some attention going forward, but they want to understand a best path forward. The RTOC staff, which is jointly staffed by Monroe County Department of Transportation and New York State Department of Transportation, and then other agencies have seats in the center, like the New York State Police, Monroe County Sheriff. So it's a nice collaborative effort. But the staff identified the need for an analysis that describes the functions and services that are currently provided, articulates operational goals and associated services in the future, and describes what actions RTOC needs to take to achieve those goals. So the strategic plan is meant to provide a complete look at the RTOC as an integrated multi-agency facility, and again, how best to accomplish long-range service delivery goals. The process included developing an inventory to understand the current conditions, developing a business concept, identifying service delivery goals and associated strategies going forward, and then documenting what actions need to implement that concept and recommendations for addressing the needs and opportunities. So if we go to the next slide, there's some specific recommendations. Even the things like the interior layout, so that staff are able, information flows through the and interactions among the staff are able to be more efficient. Providing remote access, the technology when this center was put in did easily allow the level of remote access that people come to expect, but giving managers remote access will allow greater functionality and easier ability to respond to needs, particularly in the off hours. Continuity of operations plan just is a smart thing to do when you have something like the center that detects, verifies, and initiates a response to crashes and other incidents. You want to make sure there's no downtime. Looking at the interagency agreements, looking at the staffing and how the specialist positions are functioning. And then the regional ITAS architecture is a system that documents our transportation technology flows and the information exchanges between them, and is a planning tool that GTC staff maintains, but it also is necessary for getting federal transportation funds for the technology improvements. They have to be reflected in the architecture in order to get certain funds. So that is a collaborative effort that Joe maintains hand in hand with our county. The next study is the Regional Village Local Service study. This was conducted by RGRTA with the purpose of determining the best way to deliver public transportation in selected towns and villages. Basically, what they looked at is, if you have 1,000 people, that's what they meant by selected. The idea was to explore the applicability of different service models in a small town or village setting outside of Monroe County, and how those different models work, and lay out a foundation for further analysis. There are no specific recommendations at this time, but RGRTA has initiated a follow-on study that's going to complement this and look at the applicability and feasibility of an on-demand service outside of the areas that were explored in the study. RGRTA has put in an on-demand service in Monroe County to complement the fixed route service, and has been very well received. And they want to explore, is that something that makes sense out in the other counties. So again, no specific recommendations at this time. More studies going on. But as you recall, our resolutions are accepted as evidence of completion. We'll take a position on whether or not they should be implemented. Here's an example of the service models that, in this case, out in Wayne County, you have connections between the small villages and route in. Run the routes in such a way that they connect the dots, or do you create on-demand, what's called micro-transit, so small service? You think about Uber or Lyft, so it's responsive in the small communities. What are the trade-offs? What are the balances? So, it's giving data for future decisions for service models, and what does it mean from a resource allocation standpoint? That should be the last one. Yeah, so going back to the recommendations, the planning committee did review these, accepted the presentations, and recommended approval.
Thank you, Jim. So for action items 6A, 1, 2, and 3, we did have a motion and a second. Any other further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. 6B, this is amending the Unified Planning Work Program. I would ask for a motion and a second. Motion Miguel, second over here.
Okay, so this is a budget reconciliation activity, is something we undertake every year. And due to the timing of when we have to develop draft unified, our UPWP is our annual work program. We have to have it adopted and submitted to our state and federal partners by March 1st, but our fiscal year does not end until March 31st. So we never know the final balance of projects that will carry over or their contract study being conducted. So we know we're using an estimated rollover rather than guess at a number. We use the balance of the most recently finalized quarter when we start developing that budget. So that becomes September 30th because those are known values. The net adjustment you see in that exhibit 1 that was in the meeting package reflects the actual expenditures that are taking place in the third and fourth quarters. So in some cases, you see a project going to zero. That means it was fully completed in that second half of the year and it doesn't need to carry over. There was also savings, budget staff, for all our maximum exposure that we think we're going to see. And we try not to spend everything that we budget. So we did realize some staff savings relative to the budgeted amounts. Next slide, please. So if you look at this slide, we have, with among other agencies, you'll see that 608,000, that represents spending drawn down on studies, whether it be consultant or activities that staff are doing at our member agencies. The GTC increase was those savings I referred to from staff. We had some savings on salary, range of overhead categories that resulted in an increase. But the net change is $546,000 expenditures in the third and fourth quarter to draw down our balance. Next slide, please. So we also, as part of this reconciliation, are proposing some significant changes in. There's a task that we've carried for a couple years now, household travel data collection. Our regional travel demand model relies upon information of people's travel habits to try to predict what the future will be. So this is traditionally done through a household travel survey. The last one we did was about 12 years ago, and that would entail reaching out to some number of a representative sample, providing them with a journal, and please record your trips all day, every day for, say, a 7-day period. That becomes challenging, and people are like, oh, I forgot to fill it out, and they're trying to backfill. So you start to build in some uncertainties. The big data thing, you know, the cell phones in our pocket, the GPS in our car, our social media, these are providing data points to companies that get anonymous information and start to build where are people moving. So we're able to access those data sets, and we believe we can get a deeper, more meaningful, a broader subset. And affiliations with New York State DOT and other organizations, we're able to acquire some of these data sets free because they're already purchased, say, by the state or relatively low cost. So rather than the $475,000 we had budgeted, which actually might have been a little light for a traditional survey compared to what we did 12 years ago, we are comfortable reducing that to $200,000, freeing up $275,000. And again, we expect that data to be more comprehensive and reliable. If we go to a couple different data providers and they're all pointing in the same direction, it gives a higher level of confidence that that's representative of what's going on. But we're also proposing how to use those savings. The executive committee right now is considering, I referred to earlier with the discretionary funding and having the ability to help our communities match up with opportunities. But in order to do that well, we need a staff person dedicated to that. For lack of a better term, I'm calling them a matchmaker. So I've asked the executive committee to consider creating that position. And we also, because of the workload that staff has taken on with increases from the transportation bill, and then also just working with our communities, managing a lot of studies, I had asked the executive committee to consider bringing on a junior level support person. The 225,000 is more than we would need to cover those positions, but it was the net change of, after setting aside $50,000. The GTC website is built on a software platform that is coming to the end of its useful life. It will no longer be supported after, I think, this fall. And when we reached out to the company that programmed for that, it's like, all right, you're at version 7 now, they're up to version 10, but somewhere in between they completely changed the architecture. So there's bugs if you just try to migrate straight over. And the recommendation was to replicate the look and feel by rebuilding from scratch and then migrating all the, if you go to our website, we have a tremendous amount of information, plans and studies, documents going back a long time, migrating all that information over. 50,000 is an excess. They said 42,000 on the high side, so I'm like, all right, well, 50,000 is a nice round number. We can increase the community relations and completely overhaul the website and sort of, I don't think future-proof is the right word, but at least get it to where we're not going to lose functionality. We're already having to pay extra to keep some legacy functionality going. So that's a significant change from the traditional just reconcile the actual balances. The other thing that we are requesting is under administration, utilizing a portion of the staff savings to set aside, as we talked back in February, Monroe County, we were displaced for a floor rehabilitation project. We know we're not going back to the floor. The space that Monroe County has been able to provide us is really not adequate for our staff. And regional planning council staff has also been put into like the corner of planning. They're not even connected down the hall. So we're looking at potential of the executive committee is considering do we move into a lease situation. And so we wanted to set aside some funds in the current budget year should we end up having to pay rent starting this fall. And Richard and I have had several conversations, and there's a strong desire of both our partners that we look for opportunities for the staff to co-locate so we can have keep having strong collaboration. So that is the budget reconciliation.
Any questions? Sorry.
Just kind of a comment, I guess. As you look to update your website, I just want to say that having access to all of those studies is extremely helpful. So as you're looking at the design of it, if you're kind of wondering, hey, is this good to continue to have that on there? My vote would be yes. Because
that was our intention because it's a repository and you know, it's not a document sitting on a shelf. It's something that's accessible anytime you need it.
And we actually use it. We use it when communities contact us about trying to deal with certain transportation issues. We refer them right to the website and say, well, you know, maybe not in Livingston County, but in other counties, there are other activities going on. Here are some examples of some studies. So we use it, and it's a really helpful tool.
Thank you for the feedback. It validates what we've been doing.
Jim, the $225,000, I'm assuming that's a one-time shot of money, right?
That would be an adjustment to the current budget. And then because that would be staffing, the future budgets would have to accommodate that within our form. But since we, so that would be, if we bring on staff during the current fiscal year that we had that budgeted for, that will cover that. And then if we know that there's staff, when we prepare next year's budget, we will have, instead of 8 on staff, 10 on staff and account for that before we figure out how much funding we make available to our, you know, that we put out there to share. So since we typically put out 40 to 50% of what we get to share, we just take care of internal needs before sharing extra. So, and that 225, it really was a function of the 275 we dropped off, take away 50,000, the balance is 225. I don't expect that we'll need that much, so there will be some savings that become available for reprogramming. The new position with that matchmaker, we've talked about the idea of a seasoned professional. Nice way of saying, somebody who's already retired perhaps that maybe wants to work part-time. It might start out as a part-time position, it might not be enough engagement, but it may end up being that we couldn't have enough work for full-time. So at this point, kind of up in the air, so it might depend upon a candidate. Ironically enough, a few weeks ago, I was introduced to a gentleman who retired from NISA Region 4, Bob Traver. One of his neighbors, like a year ago, moved back to Rochester. It was a Fairport native, went to school in Florida, ended up having a career working for the Pinellas County MPO and retired from there. He wanted a little board, and going on transportation. And it's like, you think about somebody who already understands the MPO world and transportation projects and fundings. That's the kind of person that's attractive, but maybe they don't want to work part-time. So and it'd be interesting to see what kind of response we get. Well, first, if the executive committee supports doing that position, and what kind of response we get. Somebody that just wants to work part-time because they're already retired, and that might be sufficient to go out and meet with communities, come back and populate that project database.
Any other questions? Ask for a vote now. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, that passes. All right, and on to 6C. There's no objections for the fiscal year 2023 to 2027 TIP amendments. We can consider them under a single action. And if a board member would like to have a separate vote, we can obviously do that also. So for item 6C, 1 through 4, a motion and a second.
Second.
Second, Chris. And Jim, you have on?
I was on brief remarks about each. So the County Road 4 at County Road 20 intersection. This amendment is requested by Ontario County, and the change reflects the low bid received. You'll see that there was a pretty sizable bump up and the federal share going up about 1.2 million. This is actually NISDOT main office is allocated statewide safety funds to this project in recognition of the safety benefits, and they need to address safety issues across the state. So this is not impacting our regional plan target. The next project, Route 31 from Route 19 to Transit Way, safety improvements. This change reflects the latest cost estimate, has not gone to bid yet. But again, NISDOT main office has stepped up with some statewide safety funds for this project. Again, additional resources to the region. There is a portion of the regional planning target funds that is being used for the right-of-way acquisition phase, but the decrease in construction federal funds is coming from the main office. The next project, the I-490 bridges over Erie Canal and Craig Road. This amendment is requested by NISDOT Region 4, but at this point, it's an effort to reflect the latest cost estimate. You can see it's a pretty sizable increase, $11 million. But this change does not include any, or this amendment does not include any changes to federal funds at this time. And that increase will be covered by state funds. Next slide, we have a chart that shows how state dedicated funds of this project are going from 8 million to 18 million, just on the construction and then inspection. However, as part of the request, Region 4 has asked that NISDOT main office identifies funds from the current federal fiscal year that are going unexpended somewhere else in the state, that they have the ability to put on this project before the end of the federal fiscal year in September, that I be authorized to add those funds as part of a staff modification without having to come back to this council. Basically, it's, we got some money, do you have a project? Region 4 can say, yes, we have a project, and GTC board has already authorized putting federal funds that are used in other parts of the state, use them here. This authority would not apply to the regional planning target funds. If there was any change to the regional planning target funds, that would come through the TIP development committee, planning committee, and the board to consider at the August meeting. Hopefully there's no concerns with that. The last project, the Route 15 corridor study, this is another amendment request by NISA Region 4. As they went through the scoping phase of the project, they've confirmed eligibility for highway safety improvement funds. Basically, had to demonstrate a certain amount of crash data with effective countermeasures to be eligible for the safety funds. The next stage would be to do preliminary engineering of right-of-way incidentals, which is mapping out property lines, doing researching, things like that. Under this amendment, those would be accelerated from 2026 to 2023 to get those moving. And you'll see there's a name change where it had said 14 corridor operations, change that to safety. It really becomes a reflection of the focus of the project being on safety and not primarily operations. This area is between 390 and Jefferson Road. There's lots of car dealerships, major commercial operations. So there's a lot happening on driveways, people moving in and out, so there's a lot of crashes. One thing that's significant about this, NISDOT main office has agreed to provide $20 million of safety funds towards this project over and above our regional planning targets. But that would be beyond the TIP horizon. So it's not reflected here yet because it's, it's a future phase, future TIP. But again, main office is committed $20 million towards this project in recognition of the safety measures. With that, I'll try to answer any questions you have.
Great. We did have a motion in the second. So at this time, for all 4 resolutions, vote. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, that passes. Next item is 6 Delta. And I'd ask for a motion to second, then we'll have Jim give an overview of the performance measures report and task. Motion. Thank you. Second. Thanks, Scott.
All right. So you may recall at the last meeting, this report was amended. It reflected some new safety targets, but those were in advance of a deadline we were faced with where we had 180 days to take action after the state took action, but those actions weren't communicated to us before the December meeting, so we had to do those at the February meeting. But at that time, I mentioned that we were working on updating other performance measure categories, and that we would be coming back at this meeting with some broader changes. But Alex Cohn and Jody Binnix are able to speak to this much better than I am, so I'll turn it over to them. And I'll just point out, you can see on this chart, you can see that the safety targets for fatalities and serious injuries were updated in February. They'll be again next year, and in February we would update it again. What you see today for June 2023 is related to highways and bridges and some transit assets, and then in several years we'll do transit safety. Alex, you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Yeah, this chart here just provides a little bit of context to the respective performance measures and targets that within each respective federal funding program areas from FHWA and FTA for highways and transit. Today we're updating the ones related to the National Highway Performance Program, National Highway Freight Program, and the FTA Urbanized Area Formula Funds. These are set by NISDOT and RGRTA respectively through their required performance-based planning program processes. And they're brought before this board to either to accept or revise. Traditionally, this board has accepted the targets set by those two agencies for near-term targets. And hopefully here we're providing a little bit better context of the schedule, which they're on.
Just that we're monitoring the situation, the low pressure system, you expect. I've unmuted. Can you hear me? Oh, wait.
If you're online, can you please mute? Okay.
It's still smoking.
So this chart here shows, so ever since performance targets were established in federal authorization, we're now in the second reporting period for pavement, bridge, and system performance targets. So based on their established in 2017, there were 2 and 4 year targets established, and now we're in the second go around of this process. So it's been an ongoing development of practice for all involved. And so today we're asking for acceptance of the 2 and 4 year targets for pavement, bridge, and system performance condition. So the respective condition measures are percentage of pavements in good and poor condition on the national highway system. Since the National Highway Performance Program funds go to the national highway system only, performance targets except for those. That's based on a combination of the 5 measures that are collected along all the pavements, and as well as assessments of the 4 structural elements of bridges on the national highway system as well. NISDOT establishes these and goes through that as part of their pavement and bridge modeling, and that's incorporated into their transportation asset management plan. And these are reported out annually through the Highway Performance Management System and the National Bridge Inventory. The next slide gives a little bit of context of where, how they've been doing on an annual basis and where the targets are. FHWA will establish what they call as significant progress to determine, to conclude if they have met their targets or not. And eventually we'll report back on sort of that feedback. There's some additional reporting that has to be done, and if targets are not met. So respectively looking at where performance is projected to be in 23 and 25.
So I'll present the performance measures for the system performance and freight measures. And the system performance measures assess the reliability, again, of the national highway system, or the NHS. As you can see on the screen, there's 2 primary measures. There's the percent of person miles traveled that are reliable, and this covers both the interstate and the non-interstate NHS system. And the second deals with freight, and that's the truck travel time reliability index, and this only covers the interstate system. So again, NISDOT is the reporting agency for these measures. The target horizon years are the 2023 2-year and 2025 4-year. And the data for this measure, these measures come out of the HPMS, the Highway Performance Management System, and the NPMRDS, which is the National Performance Management Research Dataset. The next slide. So this slide just shows the numeric values associated with these measures. The annual figures that are kind of going across the screen represent the actual performance that was reported to that NISDOT reported to FHWA. The percent of persons miles traveled on the interstate that would be reliable. NISDOT has set this at 75%, again, for those 2 and 4 year measures. And for the non-interstate NHS, they set it at 70% for the 2 and 4 year measures. And this is an increase in reliability compared to previous years. And the single freight performance measure, again, represents the reliability of travel times for trucks just on the interstate system. Again, they have a 2-year and 4-year target for 2023 and 2025. And the truck travel time reliability index is set at 2. And what that means is that they're predicting that a trip will take twice as long compared to the free flow speed. And that's also, I think, an increase compared to previous years. So they're keeping it about the same, I guess, for the truck travel time reliability. I'll turn it back over to Alex to look at the transit measures.
Thank you. And transit asset management targets are for the state of good repair of transit assets, certainly across the urbanized areas, so RGRTA and RTS Monroe, particularly related to their rolling stock of buses, paratransit and other fleet vehicles, other non-revenue equipment, and their facilities based on a useful life benchmark. So across most of these, there's actually an improvement in years, kind of reflecting some of their ongoing state of good repair investments in their fleet. This resolution was reviewed by the planning committee and is recommended for approval today. On approval of these measures, there'll be national performance measures update will be updated, and these are also incorporated in the transportation improvement program where anticipated effects and sort of reflections of these investments are documented. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex and Jody. Thank you. Any questions or discussion items? We did have a motion and second. At this time, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Next item is 6, ECHO. And this is authorizing the application to the Office of Secretary of Transportation for planning and a demonstration grant for safe streets and roads for all. And Jim, can you provide us an overview, please?
Yeah, so this is something a little different than we normally see, but the bipartisan infrastructure law established the Safe Streets and Roads for All Discretionary Grant Program, which is referred to SSRA, have acronyms. But the program supports the development of a comprehensive safety action plan, just refer to the action plan, that would identify most significant roadway safety concerns in a community, and also can support implementation of projects and strategies to address safety issues. The SS4A is broken into 2 categories. There's planning and demonstration grants, and there's implementation grants. And in order to pursue implementation grants, an eligible action plan must be in place before applying. In 2022, the first round of the SS4A was initiated. There was a relatively short turnaround time for submitting applications, and through just some uncertainties about going forward. At the time, the planning committee did not recommend moving forward. Interestingly enough, of the $400 million that was made available for planning grants nationwide, $177 million went unawarded. They didn't even have enough applications for everything that was submitted, which is unusual in a discretionary program. But I look at it as we were not the only ones that were not ready to move forward with a brand new program. USDOT has decided to roll those unawarded funds from round 1 into round 2. So that means the current round that's open has $577 million available this cycle. So if we pursue this, I think our chances are pretty good. We did discuss this at the April 13th planning committee meeting, and after that discussion, there was concurrence to explore development of a multi-jurisdictional grant application. It was interesting that our counterparts in Albany in round 1, they got over $1 million grant, but then the backstory is they didn't apply for that. They applied for about $300,000, but several communities in the area also applied, but none of them talked to each other and told each other. So the Federal Highway, USDOT, the Office of the Secretary of Transportation said, we like all your projects, but we're not doing 5 separate grant awards. You can all work together under a single grant or you won't participate. So the MPO was picked by the by USDOT and primarily, in all fairness, you can't ask a town to accept a grant on behalf of another town if they haven't already determined they want to do that. So our approach was to look at it on a regional basis. We had consulted with key staff from the city of Rochester and all 9 counties, and came back to the planning committee in May And the planning committee is recommending that the board authorize the submission of a SS4A grant application. So this slide gives you sort of the hierarchy where a state plan leads to a regional plan, leads to local plans. The New York State is expected to release their update of the statewide plan in July, so that's imminent. The regional safety plan, we're hoping to launch mid-summer. We did have a snag. We put out a request for proposals and we got 0 responses, and we're trying to understand why nobody responded on the regional safety plan, but we had 5 responses on the Wyoming County plan. So particularly where there was overlap, we're trying to organize some debrief meetings over the next 2 weeks to understand what we need to do differently on the RFP and get it back out as soon as we can to get a regional safety plan in place. And that would lead to local road safety plans, which are not yet funded, but is something that we're looking to pursue under this grant. So the next slide, it's hard to see on the screen in the room, but it was in the meeting package. The regional safety plan here, this is the various elements that a regional safety plan would cover. And our hope is that, or not our hope, our expectation is that one of the products coming out of the regional safety plan will be a template that could then be customized to each local plan. So what we have put together for a proposal for a grant application would include core activities and additional activities. Go to the next slide, please. And what we're trying to lay out, the SS4A grant is available to draw down over 5 years. We want to do a 4-year program so that there's time to make sure we fully expend before the grant expires. Core activities, local road safety plans that we would do one for the city of Rochester and one for each county. They would be specific to each jurisdiction with what their needs are. Site investigations, this is where there's a high level of crashes higher than expected or higher than the average, and we're able to fund investigations. We budgeted for 10 per year. Go out wherever that site might be, and the engineers will look and try to understand what is the crash pattern, what are countermeasures, and we identify some solutions. Some areas have, instead of like a single location, single intersection, it's a stretch of roadway that might have problems, so we have roadway safety audits built in as well, where we can fund 2 of those per year. Also want to have engagement with regional traffic safety boards in different counties, the general public, anybody that's a stakeholder in the safety planning realm. And also to do, well, in the past, we've had active transportation summits, but we want to layer in some safety and active transportation, particularly recognition of a lot of crashes between vehicles and pedestrians, vehicles and bicyclists, and where can we help make that better. But we think we can hold, the last summit was in 2019. We think as part of this grant, we can have 2 of them, basically the second year of the 4-year program and the 4th year of the 4-year program. And then data collection. In addition to the data we might want to collect, we're also identifying funding that we can acquire equipment. For example, GTC has a called a Mio Vision Scout that you can imagine. We strap this to the telephone pole, extend a telescope and a telescopic boom, and there's a camera that looks down, and that will record what's going on. We send it off, the computer analyzes, we want to count pedestrians, bicyclists, how many cars are going, turning. And several, I know NISDOT and Monroe County in particular have used this to support some of their projects. We're lending it out quite a bit, but the idea would be, let's purchase equipment that each county and the city would want for their own data collection capabilities, and they would retain ownership of that. So, yeah, if it's that camera and Wayne County wants that camera, or if there's some other county equipment they want, we use this grant to buy it for them. We're also looking at additional grant activities sort of beyond the core. Reconnect Rochester has a successful program, Complete Streets Makeover, where they go in, locations are nominated, and then each year they're able to pick a location where they go in. The idea of tactical urbanism, putting in temporary features that would restrict traffic, or I shouldn't say restrict, more slow it down, and see what kind of impact it could have on the quality of life of the community. The first location they did, the speeds before they put stuff, the average speed was, or I'm sorry, 85th percentile, so 85% of the cars are driving, or 15% of the cars are driving this speed or higher, was 48 miles an hour on a residential street that I think was posted at 30 miles an hour. After putting these temporary elements in, that speed came down to between 20 and 25 miles per hour. And if you're a pedestrian, you get hit by a car, your chances of surviving getting hit at 43 miles per hour versus 23 miles an hour is a huge difference. And it was so effective that the city of Rochester, actually part of a subsequent maintenance project, installed, it's a raised crosswalks bridge. Yeah, so put in some permanent fixtures to try to keep the traffic slowing down. This has been well received by the community. GTC has been a partner with it from the get-go. So the idea is, well, we have this opportunity to get some federal funds to support that program, and the Reconnect Rochester is able to provide the match towards that. That'll be good. Another project idea that came from them in consultation with the Rochester Downtown Development Corporation is looking at curb bump outs, but you see in some communities where Main Street has been redone and you have like extensions at the crosswalk to shorten the distance, you kind of create parking lanes. The idea would be to try some temporary bump outs, put some mural artwork in there to keep drivers from going there. This would be in consultation or in coordination with the city of Rochester to see, hey, does this make a difference for the pedestrian environment and make it calmer for traffic and easier for folks to get around. Again, that would come with matching funds from other sources, so let's grab an 80% federal share if we can. So moving on, we do have a preliminary budget that we put together. This would secure in total about $2.2 million for a total project, nearly $1.8 million federal. The federal budget or federal grant is limited to 80%, and we're able to do in-kind or cash match. So you'll see on the cash match local dollars and then in-kind dollars. Those core activities, we laid out each of those and what we expect to cover with federal, local cash, or local kind, and the additional activities that are kind of coming along with some of their own funding. But we wanted to ensure we had enough match, and we coordinated with, again, with the 9 counties in the city of Rochester about identifying an appropriate in-kind and then fill the gap with cash match. We took a look at population to create a personal share, and at 3.5 cents per capita per year, we rounded it off. To their credit, Monroe County stepped up and wanted to make a bigger contribution, and the city of Rochester also a little bit bigger than their straight up 3.5%. But this brings cash to the table that we're able to use for consultant services, and it would be these dollar amounts each year for 4 years, and that would bring in $215,000 to the program that we're able to leverage for the federal funds. I mentioned the summit, the Safety and Active Transportation Summit. The expectation is that that would have registration fees and sponsorship, so that would bring in the match needed for those. And then those additional activities, as I was mentioning, the curb bump outs on complete streets, they have some resources that they would bring for their match. So that budget is balanced with federal sources and non-federal sources. So if the board agrees to move forward with an application, these would be the next steps. They would work with the member agencies, again, the 9 counties in the city of Rochester, on getting commitments, letter of commitment, and that would be committing to providing cash match and in-kind staff time, only if we're successful in getting the grant. We do not expect any cash without knowing the grant is coming. And also, I want to point out that any of the cash that would come from our member agencies, none of that would be used for GTC staff time. So if we move forward, the full application is due by July 10th. Staff will put that together. We expect an announcement on awards in October. And if we are successful, we'll have to work through the host agency. So our GRTA Board of Commissioners is the GTCS. That's the corporate entity for GTC. They would have to execute a grant directly with the U.S. Department of Transportation. We expect that early 2024, and then we can get moving forward. I know I've thrown a lot at you. I will answer your questions and concerns. I don't know if, Rich, I know you've had some, been involved in this, if there's anything that you want to offer up for comments. I don't know Chris's perspective, if there's anything, but maybe the partners, recommending the partners first.
I would just add that the city will be applying on our own, as we discussed and coordinated. So the situation that Jim raised earlier, which I don't know if you attributed it to the specific region of New York State. Out east, we made the application without coordination on the Albany area, Capital District. So we've coordinated with Jim, but we're going to use our active transportation plan that's wrapping up in probably a couple of weeks as what's considered the qualifying plan, I believe it's called. That's not to apply for primarily implementation, but because they want, or I should say that they said they prefer the planning and demonstration grants. We have a few of those, but we've identified permanent projects and then some demonstration projects that we would do. But those are based on the analysis and all that, kind of the chart can show all the factors on trend analysis related to where we have the majority of our crashes, particularly vulnerable users, bicyclists and pedestrians. But no, we fully intend to submit the application by July 10th. But we're very careful to ensure that we're not competing with or seeing this as doing our own thing. So that's why a little bit extra cash match from the city doesn't hurt to say, no, we're committing this.
So Rich has alluded to what I talked about earlier, how the grant is 2 different programs. There's the planning and demonstration side of it and the implementation side. So the city, because the active transportation plan that GTC supported getting done is got the characteristics needed to support implementation of those types of projects, they're able to move forward and like any of our other project, any of our other member agencies that are pursuing grant opportunities, we're able to provide like letters of support and help access with the long-range transportation plan. But although the city would be submitting an application for one pot, GTC would be submitting it for the other pot, and it's in full coordination.
Jim, the question I have is that we have the UPW funds allocated for regional state. I know you talked about not getting bids and doing it. Has there been any thought given to the fact that obviously these applications are going to be in July, we're waiting until October, that's going, is that going to be more or less if you're going to go out and re-solicit, will that be done in coordination with maybe getting a jump start on this plan? And the reason I ask is you showed some of the other awards, like the award to the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority for here in Niagara County was really probably on behalf of the Buffalo Niagara Regional Transportation Council. I don't know if I'm in Niagara County, how much they coordinate with Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council. But I thought there were also awards maybe tomorrow night there, which would have been sort of that long valley. Yeah, okay. Yeah, can you speak a little bit to that? Because I mean, it feels like we're out in front of this, but that's did get some things. Now we've got a better idea of the program, so we can start moving forward and get a jump start if awarded, In other words, I'm wondering if we can catch up with the folks that received their awards through this program in the first round, so that as you're going for implementation grants or any of the member agencies are, we're not, say, a year behind that. I mean,
So
I think this program's gonna pick up. I mean, it's very rare that any discretionary program is undersubscribed.
So our intention with the regional safety plan that was funded through UPWP was to get out ahead of this. And when we had 0 responses, that was kind of a kick in the gut. What do we have to do to make that change? But we're able to get that moving before, before we expect awards to be even announced for this grant program. So we'll be already underway with the regional plan. And then even after awards get announced, it takes months to get into the agreement with the feds. So by the time we get an agreement off the ground, hopefully we're at that draft report stage. And the idea of the regional plan is to have an action plan in place that covers broadly, so that the next cycle, the 2024 cycle, we're positioned to help communities go after implementation funds, but also when we get, if we get the 4-year program going, the first activity would be those individual local road safety plans for each county in the city, refining the regional plan to local, and we would want to keep somebody, keep an aggressive schedule there, potentially having enough information in place to support going after an implementation. I'd much rather focus on getting that local road safety plan in place than worrying about the summit or some of these investigations, because that action plan is what then sets the table for the implementation fund. So that would be a priority early on to get each of those action plans done. Local road safety.
The only other question I have is, have you I don't know, I mean, I know we committed to the letter, we would have gotten it to you earlier, but have you reached out yet? Because July 10th will come fast.
Yeah, so we've had meetings with every county, was the county highway superintendent and county planners. And we've asked them to go back and make sure that their leadership is aware of this. Some of them have already started the committee process for their legislative bodies, so that resolutions could be in place. And we feel comfortable that we will have all those in place by the July 10th deadline.
Is a resolution required?
I'm sorry?
Is a resolution required?
Is a resolution required? I don't think
Just letters of commitment, so that way,
so from a department head is sufficient. But if, a particular county might have procedures in place that require.
But it's not required for.
But the feds, from what we can see, it's not required. So like, I don't think you need a city council resolution. That's what you're asking.
Yeah, because July's already.
Yeah. No, our read was that,
resolution.
Basically, department heads, if you've got a county highway superintendent saying, yeah, we're going to work with you on this, that's, it's on county letterhead or city letterhead, Commissioner of Environmental Services says, yes, we're going to work with GTC. That's sufficient.
We'll still have to get it signed by the day, right?
Yeah, that would be.
A lot further than all the commissioners.
Is there another question on this side of the room or comment? What's that? I was trying to remember if there was a hand up before. There's no comments.
Jim, I was trying to remember from the discussions with the cash match, wasn't that substantial, was it?
Yeah, was you go to that slide? Yeah, so for Livingston County, for example, $2,200 per year for 4 years. It's all on a per capita basis, and when we talk to each of the county highway superintendents, that's not even a cost for consideration.
When you take into consideration that, while it's region-wide, it's also for us at the county level, municipal-wide, it's 26 municipalities, for us, we're gonna really be actually benefiting from it. So from a cash standpoint, obviously, Livingston County will come in, and the staff time as well, because receive the benefit of it. And also, we want to be able to find employment. So.
Yes, and that's what we heard back from the highway. You know, and it's the kind of thing, you look at something, for example, you know, Lucas County with 2,200. Well, if you get one of these cameras we're talking about, that's a $4,000 camera. So you're already getting, you know, that 2 years worth of your contribution back in equipment. So, so we tried to go for something very reasonable. Again, we looked at, you know, what is a reasonable estimation of in-kind support. I think we did something like 2 hours per month for the 4 years. And then it's like, all right, but we know we need cash, you know, number one, to be able to fully match, but number two, we can't pay the consultant that's going to be doing this work with the kind. So we want to make sure there was cash in the mix, so we're paying, you know, a consulting firm that's going to come in and do these plans and, you know, have a pretty nice contract, so we can say, you know, we need you to keep an aggressive schedule. And it shows, also demonstrates to USDOT that all of our member agencies are engaged in this and committed to getting it done.
All good discussion. Thank you, everybody. And we did have a motion in the second for 6E. All in favor at this time? Aye. Aye.
Okay, Joel, we're trying to go through Alex's microphone. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. So the item here is dealing with state legislation around some insurance and the use of risk retention groups. I apologize for the length of the materials that were in the agenda, but this is not something we typically would have on the agenda, and I want to be sure everybody had the background they needed. I was contacted by my counterpart in Ithaca last week. At the time, the legislation was stuck in Albany. Earlier this week on Monday, the Senate did pass the legislation, and it was sent to the Assembly that same day. Yesterday, it was referred to the Rules Committee, so it's possible that it's already on the floor for a vote, but I haven't heard for sure. I've been here. Today is also the last day of session, so if they take a vote on it, great. If they don't, we would still be on record of going in support. Basically, what is happening is the car share programs across the state, where a not-for-profit group owns vehicles and people are able to, if they don't own their own vehicle, well, even if they do, but you're basically able to join the group and, you know, rent the car by the hour, essentially. In Rochester, we have Flower City Car Share, also called Flow Share, which uses electric vehicles, and particularly in areas that don't have have high levels of car ownership. They're trying to create opportunities for licensed drivers to be able to go about their daily needs with an electric vehicle. The challenges around insurance, and in the 80s, the federal government did create rules around what's called risk retention groups. And you could just think about this like any other insurance product, where the risk is being spread. The risk retention groups under federal rules can operate across state lines where they are authorized. New York State has long taken the interpretation that to be authorized to operate in New York State, you had to be domiciled in New York State. This created problems because there's no longer insurance companies in New York State providing this type of insurance. On May 22nd, the Ithaca car share had to actually shut down because they were not able to renew their insurance policy. A few years ago in Buffalo, they shut down. They were trying to get regoing, but there's nobody to write that policy. Flow Share in the city has an insurance policy, but they're not expecting to be able to renew it. I think it's February that it's up. So legislation was written to treat these risk retention groups the same as other insurance companies. They have the same underwriting and capitalization requirements. It's like any other insurance product, but this niche market, instead of limiting it to companies in New York State, you can spread the risk across the country. There is an insurer in Vermont that works in 20 states that's willing to offer the insurance here, but New York State is not allowing it. So the legislation is written to treat these risk retention group the same as other insurance companies. And I think of it, people are familiar with reinsurance, where insurance companies then spread the risk and put reinsurance to other insurance companies. It's akin to that. What this letter would do is just say, hey, GTC, the GTC board is on record supporting allowing risk retention groups to provide insurance to not-for-profit car sharing organizations. It also has the benefit of in areas where not-for-profit groups use volunteer drivers and provide insurance for those drivers, they would be able to reduce their insurance costs by accessing risk retention groups. So you think American Cancer Society, Meals on Wheels, any of these programs that use volunteer drivers are paying high insurance now, and they have the potential to save money. Apologize for the slideshow cutting off right at 10 o'clock. We will, in the future, have our meeting scheduled longer. We'll have to fake it somehow. Are there any questions on this?
I don't have any questions. My comment though, mobility development partners or operations, who basically runs the flow share program that Jim referenced, basically told us that the insurance is such. I'll leave it as it's detrimental in the sense that they have said that they could nearly double our fleet if they didn't have to pay the insurance. I mean, that's how much this is impacting them when annualized over the cost of putting like another 5 to 7 vehicles out. So it's pretty significant, and nobody's really been able to figure out what the background on it is, other than I'm guessing it's similar to tort reform. The attorneys and the insurance companies have good lobbyists, and they've said, yeah, this isn't beneficial to us. We can charge more if we don't have it. The problem is they're getting to that point where they're charging so much, even if the car share shut down operations.
Yeah.
And we're at a point where, we'll have to figure out what we do, but it is an important element from a micro mobility and mobility on demand, mobility as a service standpoint, that this just seems like something to get through. And I will add that the two senators who sponsored it, Brooke and Cooney, are both from the Rochester area. So they are from this region and we work with them, but now the need is for the assembly. And I think this is a solid letter.
I don't remember the specific example, but as I was researching this last week, perhaps it was in the frequently asked question, but they made reference to one organization. The traditional insurance would cost them $8,900 a month, but through the risk retention group, they can get the same coverage for $1,800 a month. So they save $7,000 a year for a not-for-profit, and as Rich said, that has the effect of limiting how much service can be put out there for our residents.
You have also affected community-based organizations who are trying to share resources, their fleets. And so that's why you see, three vans at a home group, because they each want or need their own fleets instead of, sharing resources, having to spread that risk across all of them. So.
Yeah, you'll see that memo that was included in a bunch of groups that have already signed on and support folks like Reconnect Rochester, but the New York Public Transportation Association, so the bus companies across the state, a whole series of groups that, like I said, we don't know the background, we don't know why it was held up and why is this, but it doesn't seem very logical.
Thank you, everybody. Good conversation. I don't believe I got a motion in a second for this.
Oh, sorry.
At this time. Pardon? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think because I would send a letter out on behalf of the board, I would feel better if it was the board giving me that affirmative direction.
Thank you. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anything else from new business?
I don't have anything. I don't know if any of our members do.
Hearing none, our next meeting, August 24th, here at this location. Thank everybody online and in attendance.
Thank you, everyone.
Ask for adjournment. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody.